By the end of 1970, Paul McCartney, buoyed by positive sales figures from his first solo album, had started a new project for a much more ambitious album, one produced from new material and entirely recorded in professional studios. 3 singles would emerge from that album: Uncle Albert, Admiral Halsey, The Back Seat of My Car, and Eat at Home. Uncle Albert, Admiral Halsey, was released in a few European markets and Australia, plus the US and Canada. It went to number 1 on the Canadian RPM Top 100, the Billboard Hot 100 in the US, and topped the New Zealand chart as well. Although hardcore McCartney fans may know many of the following, here are 10 things that you didn't know about Uncle Albert, Admiral Halsey. Number 10. It wasn't written as one piece. Although the following might seem obvious to some people, others are surprised to find that this track was actually stitched together from several unfinished song fragments.
We're so sorry, Uncle Albert. Hands across the water. Admiral Halsey notified me he had to have a bath or he couldn't get. Little gypsy girl.
4 song fragments, by my count. As happens with other songwriters, Paul had pieces of song ideas laying about and decided to create a medley of them as a track on RAM. Number 9. It wasn't recorded in the UK, nor was it done in one studio or session. The recording of the RAM album, including overdubs, spanned 5 months. Although initial tracks, including Uncle Albert, Admiral Halsey, were recorded in New York at CBS Studios at 49 East 52nd Street on an Ampex MM1000 16-track recorder, and at A&R Studios, also in New York, final overdubs and mixing were done at sound recorders in Los Angeles. Number 8. Uncle Albert was based upon a real person. The song was partly inspired by Albert Kendall, who had worked with McCartney's father, Jim, at Liverpudlian cotton merchants A. Hannay and Company. Kendall was a clerk at the business and subsequently married Jim's sister Millie, making him Paul's Uncle Albert. According to Paul, and I'm quoting here, Uncle Albert was a little message to my real Uncle Albert. It was symbolizing my family, basically saying, I'm so sorry I don't live up there anymore, and I've got a completely different lifestyle to all you guys. I'm sorry, Uncle Albert, like a tongue-in-cheek apology. And then with Admiral Halsey, well, it just all went mad after that when he entered the picture. Again, we come back to the word free. It was very free, and that made this record very enjoyable. Unquote. Number 7. It included a direct reference to Paul and Linda's relationship. Hands Across the Water, Heads Across the Sky is a short fragment included in the song at 4 different places in the lyric. It is a direct reference to Paul and Linda McCartney's transatlantic relationship. Number 6. Producer changes. Originally, the producer was to be James William Gerso, the same musician and producer who worked with other successful bands of the 70s, including the Buckinghams, for a brief time Blood, Sweat and Tears, and, for a long time, Chicago. Gerso even canceled his honeymoon to participate as producer, but Paul didn't agree with his directives, and Gerso left the project. Norwegian engineer Erik Wengberg replaced him, finishing the album over the course of 6 weeks. Number 5. Uncle Albert, Admiral Halsey, was the first post-Beatles McCartney number 1 U.S. hit, and it led to Paul's first solo Grammy. In spite of the popularity in Ireland and Australia of the February 1971 release of Another Day, that record only went to number 2 in the UK and number 5 in the US. That makes Uncle Albert, Admiral Halsey, Paul McCartney's first post-Beatles number 1 U.S. hit. The Beatles won 5 Grammy Awards during their career, but after the group formally disbanded, Paul went on to win 10 more Grammys on his own, including a well-deserved Lifetime Achievement Award in 1990. Number 4. The flugelhorn was played by the American bebop trumpeter Marvin Stam. This guy also recorded with many other artists, including Average White Band, Quincy Jones, Donald Fagen, the co-founder of Steely Dan, legendary jazz guitarist Wes Montgomery, Grover Washington Jr., and George Benson. Number 3. George Martin wrote the orchestral arrangements, but Paul conducted the musicians. The musicians were a group of New York-based freelancers, including past and present members of the New York Philharmonic. McCartney assembled the group and conducted the group using arrangements by George Martin. He did it on Uncle Albert Admiral Halsey, Long-Haired Lady, The Backseat of My Car, and McCartney's song Another Day, which wasn't on the album. This was a continuation of the professional relationship between Paul and George Martin that began in 1962 when they first met at EMI, and the first of the recurring collaborations on subsequent Wings and other McCartney albums. Number 2. Wings wasn't a reality yet, but using other musicians was. You may not have heard of David Spinoza, but you have heard of his work. David Spinoza, who played guitar on Uncle Albert Admiral Halsey and some other tracks on Ram, not only worked with Paul, but played on post-Beatles recordings by John and Ringo as well. And besides collaborating with former Beatles, David Spinoza was a busy man within the industry. Among his many contributions, he produced James Taylor's Walking Man album and played guitar on Honesty by Billy Joel, and Right Place, Wrong Time by Dr. John, and even released his own jazz-oriented album in 1978. He was also a member and conductor of the Saturday Night Live band from 1980 to 1982. And now, number 1. Linda's writing credit was controversial. Even though Paul defended the dual credit with Linda for the song and the Ram album, insisting that Linda was a legitimate artistic influence, his longtime publisher, Northern Songs, sued McCartney, alleging that the dual credit was done solely for financial reasons. With Linda sharing credit, the royalties were split 3 ways, with 2/3 going to the McCartneys instead of only half if Paul took singular credit. To be fair, Linda created at least some of the harmony parts on her own based upon her Glee Club experiences in school, so by that alone, she qualifies as a co-writer. The lawsuit was settled out of court. Hey, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please be sure to click that like button and leave a comment. Let me know what you think. This would also be a great time to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. And if you are already a channel subscriber, you might consider upgrading your subscription to channel member status, because being a member will allow you to see videos like this days before they're available to anyone else on this planet, or any other planet for that matter. Thanks again for watching.